Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Liz Brunette. Liz is a recent graduate in our Executive MBA class of 2023, and she and I recently connected to talk more about her MBA journey, how she decided to pursue an MBA, what led her to Darden, the impact of her Darden experience, what she's been up to since graduation, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here is my interview with Liz Brunette. Liz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Brett. Happy to be here today.
Gosh, it's great to have you here. I was thinking about potential podcast guests, and people always enjoy conversations with alumni. And your story is a really, really interesting one. I'm so glad that this worked out. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I don't always think my story is interesting, but I'm hoping someone does.
Well, how have things been? I know it's a little while since graduation. So how have things been going?
Things have been going really well. Actually, 5 days after graduation, I drove across the country with my husband, my baby, and my dog in tow and resettled outside of Seattle, Washington. And it's been nonstop ever since.
Wow, that's a lot of change. How do you like Seattle?
Besides the fact that now it's the rainy season, which will pretty much stay like this until next summer, it's beautiful. And it's a fun place to be. I'm going to miss the East Coast. I was there for a number of years, but I love change. And so here I am in Seattle.
Oh, that's great. It's a beautiful place, the Emerald City, it is so called. Well, that's great. Well, beautiful. Let's start with the same first question that we all ask all of our podcast guests. Tell us a little bit more about you. Who are you and what's your background?
Yeah, no, happy to. My name is Liz Brunette. I'm from Burlingame, California. Small town outside of San Francisco, born and raised. I went to West Point, was a 2012 graduate, commissioned as a U.S. Army officer and deployed to Afghanistan and did a bunch of fun things in the Army as an intelligence officer from about 2012 to 2018. 2018 was my first inflection moment where I decided to step back from active duty, join the reserves, where I've been ever since, so going on 12 plus years total in the military. And 2018, I also joined Amazon, decided to, work for just a small mom and pop owned company, start small, make my way up. So just kidding. Joined Amazon, came in through an operations path and became a senior operations manager pretty quickly at Amazon. And then became a general manager of an Amazon fulfillment center during COVID, which was a very interesting experience. General management in a warehouse operations, increased productivity, and expectations for customer packages during a time when it was a very challenging operation. I had a great time, learned a lot, which was one of my compelling reasons to want to pursue an MBA. And I continued my business journey at Amazon in corporate in 2020, 2021 timeframe. Where I've been ever since, supporting a couple of different orgs. Most recently, I was supporting Amazon's global diversity, equity, inclusion team, and now I'm supporting our tech sourcing team at Amazon. So I'm in a principal business operations role supporting Amazon.
Wow, so lots of things to talk about there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that first inflection point, because I know you come from the military, you're moving into the private sector, even continuing reserve. So that's a big change. How did you figure out what you wanted to do?
Absolutely. You're bringing me back. 2018. I knew coming out of the military, having a background in strategy, leadership, intelligence, how intelligence supports operations. I was interested in pursuing something similar, but to be honest, I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And, sometimes I still feel that way, but especially in, Liz back in 2017, 2018. And I, started looking, like most people do, at job titles, job roles. LinkedIn was really helpful. Talking to friends and family were helpful. And ultimately, I decided operations would be a really interesting path into learning more about the private sector and what roles are out there. And my career at Amazon has just snowballed from where I started to where I am now. It's a complete 180, but that was the perfect initial step into the civilian sector, into the private sector, to figure out what I wanted to be. And that absolutely led me to my MBA, and that's led me to where I am today.
I'm thinking about your warehouse experience. I went with, gosh, it feels like a number of years ago, but one of the trips that we took here in the DC area with some of our executive MBA students, I think back 2017, 2018, was to a fulfillment center in Baltimore. And it was a huge fulfillment center, probably one of the largest on the East Coast, maybe one of the largest at the time, the Amazon network. And they had the robots that move the all the stuff around, and that was fascinating to see. But the other thing that was really staggering was just how much stuff is flowing out of the warehouse to be shipped, and just the volume and the pace of everything. And I'm thinking about pandemic. People are shopping online or asking for things to be delivered. You got supply chain shortages. You have customer expectations. You have employees that are concerned about their own health and stress of all of that. I mean, that is a very complicated managerial situation.
Yeah, yes, to say the least. I did very well in my operations and supply chain classes at Darden, largely due to my experience at Amazon leading in operations. I could directly apply a lot of, hands-on experiences I had.
Yeah, I can believe that. I mean, obviously you've had prior experience in the military at that point, but that's such a novel. I mean, most of us had not been through something like a pandemic before. How did you adjust during that period? I feel like that would have been a lot.
Well, without sounding cliche, one of the things you learn pretty quickly in the military is how to adapt in unusual circumstances, especially when, the operation increases and there's kinetic action. You just have to adapt to the situation and make the best of it and make right decisions. And that's why you plan, right? You put plans in place so that when there's, you need to start it, you have something to go off of. And especially leading operations, there are so many plans. There's a game plan for everything. And of course, COVID challenged game plans completely. But it wasn't that everyone was starting from scratch. We just had to adjust where we were. And, I was one of many leaders just trying to figure out how do we make the best situation out of something that's new and very challenging while keeping everyone safe.
All right. Well, you mentioned that you started to think about an MBA at some point along this journey. What initially attracted you to an MBA?
Yeah, I think my grand business journey at Amazon challenged, my understanding of leading as a business manager and as a business leader. But I have to say, maybe it was a little bit of imposter syndrome. Maybe it just was a little bit of curiosity and wanting to learn. But I just knew I had a lot of knowledge gaps. I felt like I was learning by the school of hard knocks. I was trial by fire. I was learning operations and learning strategy and learning finance and learning supply chain management and budgeting and leading an entire operation by doing it. And I think you can learn a lot that way, but I knew there was a lot I was missing and I wanted to fill those knowledge gaps. And to me, an MBA was the right path to pursue to one, get my graduate degree complete. And I wanted to make sure I went to grad school. But two, an MBA was what I needed professionally to really kind of round out where I was and where I am right now.
What attracted you to Darden?
A couple things. You're going to laugh, but Darden was the only program I applied to because my husband back in 2018, we moved to Charlottesville not to go to Darden. He went to UVA Med School. So he started 2 years before me, and I was working remotely with Amazon and doing my thing. And in the middle, towards the end of his first year, I was like, I have some time on my hands and I really wanted to get my grad degree and I'm, leading in operations at Amazon. And I really want to do this. And I was like, there's a top 10 MBA program in my backyard. Why don't I just apply? So I waited until his second year and I applied so that I could graduate the same time, the same month, the same year as him. And so our timelines would match up perfectly. And, by all graces out there, it all worked out. I got accepted and we were able to graduate together on the same day.
There's a lot of planning that goes into this. People are trying to find it's maybe not a perfect time, but the window that makes sense for all the other people in their lives. And so that makes total sense what you shared there. So you start as a Darden student. You mentioned graduate school was a goal of yours. You had a vision for how an MBA could be helpful to you, but you're a brand new student at Darden. What was that adjustment process like?
It was, I want to say it was significant. It was because I had to determine pretty quickly how I could best use my time, knowing the commitments of Darden. So I knew I had my weekend residencies. I had LR1. I had to plan for my classes at night. I had to find time for my homework and meeting with my learning team and all the details that go into the MBA experience. And so time management was a big piece. And oh, by the way, Brett, I found out I was pregnant just a couple weeks before LR1 started, which completely like changed my plans and how I approached my MBA. So definitely caused me to critically think about time management and how I was going to do everything.
Yeah, I wanted to talk more about this. I'm glad you brought it up because I recall you had an addition to your family, and that is a big adjustment for anybody, let alone someone going through an executive MBA program, working a full-time job, doing all of these things together. So, tell us a little bit more about your time management strategies, how you figured out a schedule that worked for you and your family.
Yeah, I joke I could probably teach a masterclass in time management at this point because layering on to that, I was also an actively drilling reservist. So I was attached to a unit. So I had reserve responsibilities on top of balancing which weekend I had drill, which weekend I had my MBA, which weekend my husband was actually going to be traveling at another hospital in another state for his medical school training, and then just layering on everything. And when I had my OBGYN appointments, when I had to be in class, I had a calendar. My husband and I would sync up all of our activities. So I put my work schedule in there. He put his med school schedule in there when he was going to be at this hospital or when he had his big tests. Then I had to layer on my reserve schedule and I had to figure out I would highlight all the conflicts and then I would do it quarter by quarter. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. If I could do it quarter by quarter, I was going to be okay and keep myself on track and keep my sanity. And so we literally had this like shared calendar where I would like literally just make sure I could do everything and I had time to do things. And it actually worked out. I don't know how. Maybe that was the golden strategy, was just seeing everything and being able to identify the conflicts. But it all worked out and I attended all my classes. I don't think I missed like a single class except when I was delivering my baby during Q3. And my husband was able to graduate on time and I graduated on time and it all worked out.
Well, I want to talk about this a little bit more because time management, I mean, this is really, I think it's one of the big challenges for any executive MBA student. It's always interesting to hear how people do this. So you have this share calendar. So you're going every couple of months. So you mentioned quarter by
Days.
quarter. Okay, all right. So just for people who are learning about our program, in the Executive MBA program, you'll get new classes every couple months. So quarters are 2 months in duration. So as Liz is talking about quarter by quarter, typically taking 3 classes at a time. And the quarters themselves, it's typically about an 8-week quarter, 7 weeks of instruction followed by 1 week of exams. And so that's the basic outline. So you and your family, your husband, sitting down, looking at this calendar, identifying all the conflicts. How do you figure out when you have time? So you do all of that. So then how do you figure out like time for school or time for homework or learning team or any of that kind of stuff?
Well, I had a couple things that worked to my benefit. One, it was still COVID time, so I was still working remotely. So I had that work flexibility. My work wasn't challenging me to travel, so I didn't really have to worry too much about business travel. I just kind of postponed everything. I was lucky too because my reserve unit commander was very flexible and put a priority one with like your civilian job because your civilian job pays the bills, not the reserves. And then the second thing is they really prioritize education. So I was able to put my weekend residencies ahead of drill whenever there's a conflict, and I would just make up the drill later. So my unit was extremely flexible. I don't think everyone is as lucky, and I just think I had a good commander, a good relationship there. And so I was able to then prioritize my MBA. And luckily, I also had a great boss at Amazon. And because when you apply to the executive program, you have to have, the recognition. I think it was the sponsorship from your civilian employer. Like they have to recognize and acknowledge that you're going through the program before you, matriculate into the program. And so I had a conversation with my boss up front, and he was more than supportive to give me the time off I needed to do my weekend residencies, i.e., I was gone at least one day a month for school. And then I was busy in the evenings for class. And on certain evenings, I just could not take work calls if there was a conflict. Luckily, I had a team at work who understood that. And so that meant that I could then prioritize my MBA where I needed to. And yeah, going back to the question you asked me about my husband, we were able to then determine, well, okay, and especially when I had the baby, when I had to take my final exams or when I had to take night classes, I just had to tell him, hey, Tuesdays, Thursdays, between 7:30 and 9 or whenever the hours were, I was like, I'm out. Like my mind is in class. I cannot physically be present anywhere else besides my computer in my home office. Then he would just pick up all the slack. There's a couple times where that didn't work out, and I actually had to recognize that in advance and hire a babysitter. And there's a couple times where I didn't know until last minute. And so I had a baby pop on camera a bunch of times between Q3 and when I graduated, because I had to bring a baby with me to my virtual classes. But luckily that wasn't too many times.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all of that. I think the details are helpful for people to hear. I mean, this is real life as an executive MBA student. We have many parents who become first-time parents or have new additions to their family, moms, dads, during the program. Yeah, how many hours do you feel like you spent on school? I know it varied on a per week basis. Like, do you feel like you have a handle on that?
It was a lot more than I thought going into the program. I think when I applied, I was like, oh, this will be easy. Just a couple days here and there. It's the executive program. I didn't do as much research as I probably should have about the time commitment. It was more because I cared about doing well and I wanted to make sure I was prepared for every class. I think I over prepared. My husband tells me I over prepared. My learning team tells me I over prepared. But that was just kind of my strategy. I felt like I would best maximize, the time I spent in my MBA program and the utility of having an MBA by doing all the reading and all the homework myself up front and going to class, like knowing everything. And of course, that's the Darden method, right? You do the homework assignment, you do the work, you do the readings before you show up to class so that when you do arrive, you could stand up and teach it, hypothetically. So I would say, gosh, let's say I had two classes that were each an hour and a half. So that's 3 hours right there. Learning team would meet an hour before each one on, most quarters. So that was another 2 hours. That's another five. That's five. And then if you factor in like tests and whatnot, I'm spending probably 5 to 7 at a minimum each week for my MBA. But then if you layer on homework, that's probably another couple more hours. It's probably closer to 10, to be honest.
That makes sense. I mean, that checks out. So you talked about, your husband supporting you as you have class commitments and that kind of thing. The other thing I think about is classmates. How did your classmates help you through this? You mentioned your learning team. Any other examples that come to mind?
Yeah, 100%. I loved my Darden time. I miss it. I miss it because of just the camaraderie. I think Darden does a really good job with early on, very intentionally focusing some of the discussions around team building and relationship building with, with and amongst your classmates. So very early on, I got to know so many of my fellow classmates in the program beyond just my learning team, and they were immensely helpful for me. Darden is a collaborative environment. I think Darden is just very intentional about being collaborative. And so when I was stuck on assignments and I'm just like, oh, I need help explaining this finance concept because this is, foreign to me. I would reach out to my classmates sitting to the left and right of me in our residencies and ask for help. And no one would ever say no. Everyone would say yes. So just that high level of collaboration and willingness to support was so helpful. And of course, the learning team model, I fully support it because you, one, have like built-in best friends from day one. So you don't feel alone, especially eating at lunch and, just reaching out for help. But no, I got help from everyone. And then when I had my baby, I just had help from every angle. I remember I had a group assignment due, and in the hospital, I messaged my team and I was like, I'm sorry, I can't complete my section. I can't complete my part of this group assignment. I feel like I'm letting you down. And I felt so terrible because I couldn't. And they were like, Liz, why do you care so much? They're like, we've got you. We'll do your section. We'll make sure you get full credit. Like, we're here for you. And I was like, I'll send you what I can. But they already took care of it. And so I just think that there's a lot of just support in the Darden system. And anyway, I really appreciated it.
Was there a point where you felt like, okay, we've got this a little bit more settled, maybe found a rhythm, or was it just really every quarter was kind of its own thing?
There definitely was a rhythm. And I think I settled into it eventually, especially when it came just to figuring out when was my time to get, prepare for classes. Like, when could I actually do the reading? When could I fit in, time to meet with my learning team? I think at first, like, everyone's just trying to figure it out. Like, when's the best time to meet? Are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? Are you before or after dinner person? Like, what is your work schedule? So I think once we went through that whole, like, probably it took 2 or 3 quarters to feel like comfortable with like how to prepare and how to fit in the assignments. But then after that, I just felt more comfortable. I also just became just a faster reader for all of our cases we were assigned, knowing like, okay, these are the types of questions that are typically asked. I need to really focus on this. Okay, I need to highlight these. Like, I would just have my own framework for how to approach it that I would just kind of develop over time.
Well, what you just described there, that framework, I mean, that's absolutely what the case method is about, right? So, you prepare for class, you go to class, but there's this fourth step in the learning process. It's reflection. It's reflecting on what was discussed at class and the questions that were asked, things that you saw, things that you missed. Where did the discussion go? And then you're supposed to think about how do you build that into the next case that you read, and thinking about where you think the discussion is going to go and anticipating that. And it's an iterative process. But that fourth step, super important in a Socratic learning environment, to reflect on how the how the discussion went and what that means, the implications of that for the next case, the next class.
Completely agree.
So what was the most surprising thing for you about your Darden experience?
The most surprising thing, I think I was surprised just with how much I liked it and how much I would just look forward to the weekend residencies. Not, I think going up to DC was for me fun. I was in Charlottesville. Going up there 1 weekend a month was an awesome opportunity. I enjoyed just the relationships with classmates, the very interesting professors, just the learning environment at Chance Family Grounds, the different like Saturday Night Live and the Friday Night Live events that were put on, and like our social functions. We had a social chair, which that matters because that's a key in networking, and that's how you get to know people and build those relationships. I just was surprised by. I just thought approaching an MBA would be really static and only focus on academics, and I thought it would be on just the more like academic side. But the whole Darden experience went so far beyond just the textbooks and the cases in the classroom. It was like an entire experience, and I wasn't expecting that, and it was such a delight to me.
I appreciate your saying that. I think a lot of people, when they think about an executive MBA program, they do think of something that's much more transactional, right? People are very busy, got a lot going on, just going to come to class, get the degree, move on. Very different experience at Darden, to your point. Um, what do you
But
think
I
the
think
impact? Oh, yeah, go ahead, please.
I would say that, but if someone wants that experience, they can also have that. That's the thing. It's kind of a make your own adventure. If you're there and you only have time for the academics and you're going to show up to class and you don't have time for all the other stuff, you don't have to do everything. You can get as involved as you want. And for me, I found my balance, and I think other people found their balance. And I think you can, I don't think there's an expectation that you have to do all this other stuff, but it's there. And that's the nice thing. It's there and it's always there. And you're always welcome to participate in these, school sponsored events and then like classmate sponsored events. And it just went so far beyond that. So I always felt like I had a community and I could just jump in and jump out whenever I had bandwidth or I didn't have bandwidth.
What do you think of as the impact of your Darden experience?
I honestly, I think I'm a more well-adjusted person. And I know that sounds kind of odd, but I think going into my MBA, I still was trying to figure out, like I said in the beginning, like what do I want to be when I grow up? And do I want to stay at this company? Like, is this the right path? And I was asking all these ultimate questions. I'm alluding to Andy Wick's class right now. I was asking the ultimate questions. Who am I when I show up at work? Like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Like, how do I show up and, do my best every day? What does that actually mean? I was asking myself all these questions, but I just spun myself in circles because I just never really knew the answer or how to approach the answer. And the MBA provided a framework to enable me to think big about myself as a human on this earth and myself as a professional in part of the cog of the wheel of the corporate world, and figure out, is this where I want to be, and what do I want to do with my career? So I thought the entire Darden experience was extremely transformative in that way.
That's very powerful. I will tell you, it's always surprising to me. I mean, when I first came to work with business school students, I worked with law students previously, and so I imagined when I started talking to people about the impact of their Darden experience, they were going to say, "Oh, accounting, finance, all this technical stuff." To a person, there is a lot more focus on how they developed personally and grew personally through this experience, which I think is a very powerful thing. I mean, it speaks to the nature of the experience. It's transformational, right? It's not transactional. It's designed to push you to do this work. You take a class like Ultimate Questions, that's an elective, but even the whole thing is really designed to get you to engage with yourself in that kind of way.
Absolutely. Like the Darden Career Center and all the classes we take with them really just challenges you to think beyond just the academic curriculum. It's like, where do you want to take your career? Let's talk about like resumes. Let's talk about applying to jobs. Let's talk about different job industries. Let's talk about, are you a climber? Are you a switcher? Are you an entrepreneur? Right? All these different tracks you could be on. And no one really has those conversations unless you're in an environment that's structured to have those conversations. And Darden, I appreciate the fact that the total curriculum it's not just finance, accounting, strategy, like all your core classes. It goes beyond that and includes a whole suite of electives, which is, you can tailor to what you're interested in. And it has all these other skill sets that will really help you as just a business professional and also as a person.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Ultimate Questions elective? Because we talked with Andy on office hours, and he obviously working on a book based on it. But it's always fun just to hear from the student perspective.
Happy to. I came into Darden when I applied to Darden, the first person I told was my dad, and he was very proud of me. A couple months later, and before I started at Darden, my dad passed away very suddenly. And so that had a profound impact on me and has continued to have a profound impact on me because I started to think about, who do I want to be at the end of my life? And I started to ask myself these questions. I read this great book by Michael Hyatt called Living Forward, which actually teaches you to think at the end of your life and then work backwards. And then you live forward. And I started to think about, well, am I on the right path? Am I leading the life I want? Will I have regrets on my deathbed about what I did or did not do? And all these things. And when I heard of Andy Wick's class, I was like, I had an aha moment. I'm like, he's asking and challenging us to think about the same things I'm challenging myself to think about right now. And he was asking better questions. And the way he structured the class was that each class had a question. It was centered around a question. One of the ones I threw out earlier was, who do you want to be when you show up to work? That's a great question. I think everybody asks that question to themselves. Who are you, and who do you want to be when you show up? And that class in of itself, I remember it very strongly because I thought in terms of who I am at Amazon. Am I Liz when I show up to Amazon, or do I put on a mask of Liz, the business operations, program manager, the manager at Amazon? Is that a different person? Am I leading authentically? Am I also happy when I show up to work? Do I need to be happy when I show up to work? Or is work more transactional? Or do I need work in this job and this title and this pedigree, whatever, to fulfill me? There's no right answer. And I think that was the intent of this class. There are no right answers, but there are so many questions, and each person can interpret them differently. So the final exam for his class incorporated writing an obituary. And I took that as an opportunity to really, introspectively think about my life and my impact and who I want to be. And some people might think, well, writing an obituary in your MBA program, like, what's the connection? Well, the connection is it challenges you to think about your life. And are you leading the life you want? Are you doing everything intentionally and by design, right? Anyway, that exercise was a profound, transforming moment for me. And it's something that I have saved and I care a lot about. So when I think back on my MBA, there's a handful of classes that have meant a lot to me. And I just carry the knowledge with me every day. And that one is without a doubt one that I take and carry with me.
Well, I got to ask you this for natural follow-up. What's another class that you still carry with you today or made that kind of impression on you?
I took a great class with Frank and Veronica Warnock, and it was all about your impact on society, right? And I think they're both a phenomenal duo, an amazing couple, great educators and great philanthropists and members of the community who champion social impact. I took their class, I think it was Q4, so it was kind of early on. And after taking their class and thinking about, well, what impact do you have in society? Like, especially as a business leader, how do you think about your company, your firm's greater impact in the world? How can you then go back and make a difference? And after taking their class with Dr. Frank and Veronica Warnock, I decided I was going to make an internal switch. It was like this light bulb went off. I was like, I need to do something different at Amazon to have an impact in this world. And that is when I joined the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team at Amazon. And I started essentially it was like a month after their class, I started with them, or a couple of months maybe. And through that, I was able to just see a different lens of how like a Fortune 10 company, right, can have social impact and do good in the community around the world. And anyway, so their class challenged me to think, as a business leader, how can I increase my impact in the world in a very positive way? And anyway, that led me to an internal switch, a very tangible output on how it impacted my life and then my focus at work.
I'm thinking about that switch. So you were primarily in like operations. Strategy type roles, and you moved to the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team.
Absolutely. Doing business operations. So my core skill set, it was within the same, job, family, but the team I was on was different. And it's not to say that you can't have social impact in operations. You certainly can. My fulfillment center, we would do donations. And when we would, liquidate out items in our fulfillment centers, like we would donate, and we would do volunteer events, and was very active in our affinity group network across Amazon. So I think no matter where you are as a business leader, you can find ways to have impact. But after taking their class, I just wanted to amplify that. I wanted to go to the top. And so I worked directly for the VP that led DEI globally at Amazon to see from that perspective, how can a company this big continue to shape the world in a very positive way and do positive social impact?
Wow, that is a great story. Liz, is there any other sort of like lessons or things that you still think about from your time at Darden that guide you as you go through your day to day?
I would honestly say one of the greatest takeaways that I have from just my Darden experience, and one that I would certainly just pass on to people who are thinking about starting their MBA, but maybe are apprehensive because they have other life commitments. Firstly, everybody has other life commitments in the executive program. Everyone's a working professional. Half the people are parents and have other activities in their lives that are, important and take up their time. And so I think there's 1,000 reasons to say no to opportunities, especially when you're busy, when you have a family and there's everything. And there's always like that sense of self-doubt. I don't think I can do this. But my challenge to everyone, and I think I'm proof of that, is if something is important to you, and especially if you have a great support system around you, nothing can hold you back from achieving your goals. There's always a way.
That's such a good point. I think when I say we on the admissions team talk with prospective students, it does feel like there's a lot of assumptions people have about who they are and who can be in an executive MBA program, and maybe this imposter syndrome of feeling like they're not the right kind of candidate. But there's also a lot of life stuff that people bring up. Oh, I have this commitment, or I have this other thing, and I just don't know if now is the right time. And what we always tell people is like, I could find 10 executive MBA students who had more on their plate, less on their plate than any particular prospective student. Everybody's kind of going through this program, got different things they're contending with, but it can be done. And it absolutely can be. It's just a question, I think, a lot of times of sort of making the decision and committing to it, and then putting structure in your life, people at home, people at work, finding those people who could really help you through the process. And to your comment earlier, you also have all these great classmates who are going through the same thing and also willing to help you along.
Yeah, 100%. Completely agree.
Well, Liz, what are you looking forward to in the coming months? So exciting that you're on the West Coast. I didn't know that until this interview, so it's great.
Well, Brett, life does not stop. Life continues on, and there are so many things that happen after the MBA, especially for me. Well, a big thing is I'm due for baby number 2 in March. So that's my big announcement. And that is going to continue to challenge me as a working mom. Actually, because of having my first baby, I joined the global board for families at Amazon. So I am continuously trying to champion, support, and understand more about how to support our working parent population, and then how to be a successful working parent, working mom myself. And so I'm going to double that in March and become a parent for the second time. And so I don't know, maybe check back in with me in a couple of months and see how I'm holding up. But I'm very excited for the road ahead.
Well, congratulations. That is awesome news. I so enjoy catching up with alums here on the podcast because I get to hear about all the exciting things that have happened for them professionally, but also personally. I think that's such a treat. So congratulations to you and your family, Liz. Can't wait to hear more about that in 2024. So tell us, last question. A word of advice for the prospective student listeners. Obviously, you shared a lot here already, but something you would encourage them to think about as they go forward on their own MBA journeys.
I think in addition to what I said earlier, I think it's so important to think strategically about your support system, because you can't go through the MBA program alone in a complete silo. It is a total experience. And if you want to maximize the value of your MBA, you got to be all in. And when you're all in, it's going to come at a cost here and there. And having other members of your family, friends, community understand and support you will only enable you to be more successful. So that means frank conversations with boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, significant other, talking with mom, dad, brothers, sisters, other folks around you, and letting them know. And especially work relationships too, because you're going to need time off from work. You're not going to want to answer work calls during a weekend residency or during LR1 or LR2. Work is just going to have to wait. And having those expectations up front and building that support system will just make it easier for you.
That is great advice. We always tell people you want to bring people into this process as early as you can. Help them understand why you're interested in pursuing an MBA, why you're excited about this particular program, what the schedule looks like, and what it means for your availability, what it could mean going forward for what you can commit to at work or take on, and at home as well, how they can be helpful to you as well. Generally, people want to help. Those are all really, really important conversations. Well, Liz, I'm so happy for you, all the things that are going so well for you professionally, and also the exciting news for you personally. Thank you so much for taking time out for the podcast. It's great catching up with you.
Thank you so much, Brett. I'm honored. It was great talking with you today.
And that was my interview with Liz Brunette, a recent graduate in our Executive MBA class of 2023. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA at darden.virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.